"Sheriff," he muttered. "Doyle." The door opened a crack. Sheriff Doyle filled the doorway like a boulder tall, broad, and wrapped in a department-issued jacket dusted with fresh snow. His badge glinted under the lantern light. So did his eyes, sharp, calculating. "Evening, Doc," he said casually, though there was steel underneath. "Didn't think anyone would be out here this late." Nolan opened the door a little wider but didn't step aside. "Blizzard drove a couple travelers into the woods. Gave 'em a place to warm up." Owen stood behind Nolan, stiff as stone. Aurora didn't move. Ash stood between her and the door like a shadow cast in muscle and fur, silent now, but every inch of him alert. Doyle's gaze drifted past Nolan, scanning the room like a slow-moving spotlight. "You got a dog in there?" "Couple strays pass through," Nolan replied without hesitation. "They find warmth, then move on." Doyle's eyes landed on Ash. Locked. A flicker passed across his face, recognition or calculation. It was hard to tell. "That one," he said, pointing subtly with a gloved finger. "Looks trained. Not just any mutt, huh?" Nolan shrugged. "Not my dog. Didn't come with papers." Ash took one step forward, just one, his body still low, eyes locked on Doyle's. Then a flash. Teeth. Not a full lunge, not a wound meant to harm. But Ash darted forward, quick as a ghost through snow, and snapped just inches from the sheriff's outstretched hand. No blood. Just a warning. Precise. Controlled. But enough to knock the breath out of the room. "Jesus!" Doyle barked, pulling back, his other hand flinching toward his sidearm. "Easy," Nolan said, stepping between them. "You spooked him." "He's trained," Doyle said, glaring at Ash. "That's a bite hold. Law enforcement K-9s are the only ones conditioned to do that." Owen stepped forward now, his voice calm but clear. "We found him tied up out there, half dead. No tags when we saw him." Nolan played the role perfectly weathered, annoyed but helpful. "Didn't figure it was your jurisdiction to ID abandoned dogs, Sheriff." Doyle didn't answer. His eyes were still locked on Ash, like he was trying to see beneath the fur-like he was peeling away layers of silence to expose something buried. "Name?" he asked finally. "No collar, no chip," Nolan said flatly. "If you've got a lost dog report, I'm happy to scan him. But I don't think this one belongs to anyone anymore." Ash held still, perfectly still, like a soldier waiting for command. Not aggressive, but not yielding. Watching, reading. Doyle glanced back at the snow-covered woods, then again at the firelight flickering behind Nolan. Something changed in his tone. A layer peeled back. "You know Reyes?" he asked. Quiet now, like he already knew the answer. Nolan didn't blink. "Lot of people come through these parts. Can't say the name rings a bell." Doyle smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Well, if this dog was law enforcement and he's in your cabin, that means someone's got questions to answer." He nodded once. "I'll check back." He stepped off the porch without another word, leaving boot prints that filled slowly with falling snow. Nolan closed the door slower than necessary, locked it, drew the curtain again. Silence stretched for long moments. Then Ash let out a breath and slumped to the floor again. Not asleep, just conserving. Owen ran a hand through his hair. He knew. Nolan nodded, but he doesn't know enough, yet. Aurora finally spoke. "He was trying to take him," she whispered, not asking, waiting for the right moment. Nolan looked at her, surprised by the clarity of her tone. "Sheriff Doyle was in the news," Owen added, voice low. "When Reyes died, he signed off on the accident report. I remember because it felt rehearsed." Nolan sat back down beside the fire, staring at the flames. "Then we better figure out what Ash remembers. Fast." Outside, the wind picked up again, soft, but colder than before, like something breathing just beyond the trees. The wind had shifted. Outside the cabin, the storm no longer howled. It whispered, low, ceaseless, like voices carried across a frozen lake, muffled by distance but never truly gone. Inside, the fire crackled, spitting sparks that glowed orange for a breath before dying in the dark. Owen sat with one knee bouncing, eyes flicking toward the door every time the timbers creaked. Aurora knelt beside Ash, stroking the fur behind his ears. The dog hadn't moved since the encounter with Doyle, but his breathing had grown steadier, measured, watchful. Nolan returned from the back room with a battered metal case. It bore a military seal, faded now. He set it on the table and opened it with a click. "What is that?" Owen asked. "Field-grade veterinary scanner," Nolan said. "Picked it up after I retired. Never trusted the cheap ones they started handing out in the cities." He pulled on a pair of glasses, their frames bent, lenses smudged with years of use. He reached for Ash slowly, giving the dog a chance to see his hands. Ash allowed it. The scanner beeped awake. Nolan ran it slowly along Ash's neck and shoulders, frowning in concentration. The device beeped once, then twice, then stopped. Nolan stared at the tiny screen, his brows furrowed, mouth tightening as he pressed a few buttons. "What's it say?" Aurora asked. Nolan didn't answer right away. He turned the scanner toward the light, scrolled back, then whispered under his breath. "Huh." He sat down, let out a breath like someone had opened a door to old ghosts. "Well," Owen pressed. "There's a chip," Nolan said finally. "But it's been encrypted, full override. Not civilian, not even standard police. This is something else." Ash lifted his head slightly, as if the words stirred something ancient inside him. Nolan rotated the scanner again, magnifying the last line of data. "Encrypted protocol, level 7, clearances sealed. Handler status, terminated." Aurora looked up sharply. "Terminated?" "It means his partner's dead," Nolan replied. "But that's not what concerns me. Look here." He pointed to a blinking code, a string of letters and numbers that meant nothing to Owen or Aurora. But Nolan read it like a fossil hunter, brushing away ash to see bone. "This isn't just sealed, it's erased. There's a digital wipe signature embedded in the metadata." "Someone tried to delete him," Owen said slowly, putting the pieces together. Nolan nodded. "Dogs like Ash working dogs, K9, are logged into every department system. Records, training, missions. That data never vanishes." "Not unless someone makes it vanish." Ash stood now. Not fully, but enough to press against Aurora's knee. She reached for him instinctively, but her hands trembled. "It's like he was buried under ice," she murmured. "Not just left behind, covered up." Nolan clicked off the scanner. The room felt colder now, despite the fire. "Back during my time," he said, leaning back in his chair, "we had units trained for specific cases, bomb detection, narcotics, search and rescue. Each one logged, each one traceable. But there were rumors about dogs trained off the books, used for things the law didn't want attached to a badge." "You think Ash was one of them?" Owen asked. "I don't know yet, but that tag K9241, unit, Reyes, It meant something, and whatever Reyes was involved in, it wasn't clean. He stood and walked to the woodpile, loading more logs into the fire with practiced hands. The flames jumped higher for a moment, casting long shadows across the walls. Aurora leaned her forehead against ashes. "He fought to get out," she whispered. "Out of the ice, out of whatever they buried him in. And he still trusts us." Owen watched them, then turned to Nolan. "So what now?" Nolan paused. His eyes, once tired, now burned with something sharper, something old and unfinished. "Now," he said, "now we find out who tried to erase this dog, and why they were so damn afraid of what he remembers." Ash didn't growl this time, but his eyes locked on Nolan's, and for the first time, the old vet felt like he wasn't looking into an animal. He was looking into a witness. The storm had calmed by morning. A heavy hush blanketed the woods, the kind that followed after something old had been disturbed. Inside the cabin, the fire had died to embers. Nolan stood by the window, staring out at the pale light bleeding through the snow-covered trees. His coffee had gone cold in his hand. Upstairs, Aurora moved carefully, her steps muffled beneath the old rafters. Nolan hadn't meant to leave her alone up there, but she'd insisted on looking for extra blankets. The attic door had creaked open like something exhaling from the past. She didn't mean to find it, but when her foot hit the uneven board near the back corner, the hollow thud told her everything. She knelt, pried it open with stiff fingers, and there it was, a footlocker scuffed with age, the paint almost gone from the lid. The brass plate read, L.T. Elijah Avery, NYPD, K9 Unit, 1289. Her breath caught. The latch fought her at first, but with a grunt it gave way. The hinges cried open, and dust rose like memory. Inside, a folded flag, yellowed photographs, a sealed envelope marked "Do Not Discard," a journal bound in cracked leather, and beneath all of it, a stack of police reports and a photograph so sharp it seemed to hum in her hands. She carried it downstairs like it might fall apart if she blinked. Nolan turned when she entered the room. His face changed the moment he saw what she was holding. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, voice rough. "In the attic," she said gently. "It's Elijah's, isn't it?" He stared at the box. For a second he didn't speak, then, "I packed it away after the funeral. Couldn't bring myself to throw it out. Couldn't look at it either." Aurora placed the photo on the table between them. It was taken outside what looked like a city precinct. 4 officers stood in uniform. At the center, a man with tired eyes and a crooked grin, Nolan's son, Elijah. Next to him, one hand resting proudly on the harness of a familiar dog, Ash, no doubt, same build, same scar near the right ear, same steady, searching gaze. And next to Ash, a woman, name tag glinting, Reyes. Nolan sank into the nearest chair like the weight of it had finally found him. "I didn't know he worked with her," he murmured. "Reyes was just a name, in a briefing. No photo, no context." He picked up the journal, flipped through the pages. His son's handwriting sharp at the start, messier toward the end. Emotion clung to every line like fog to glass. Aurora sifted through the reports. Most were routine, incident logs, transfer papers, but one dated 6 months before Elijah's death stood out. Requested reassignment of K9 241 pending investigation into internal misconduct within Special Ops Division. Request denied. Her voice dropped. They tried to move Ash. Nolan ran a hand down his face. And someone didn't want that to happen. They sat in silence for a moment. The cabin seemed smaller now, like the past had returned and refused to leave quietly. "I thought he died in a drug raid," Nolan said. "That's what the department told me. Clean and quick, but this—" He gestured to the journal. "This tells a different story." Aurora flipped to the back page of the book. A single line written like a whisper. "If something happens, find the dog. He remembers everything." She looked at Ash, sleeping near the hearth. The firelight danced across his fur gray, dark and speckled like the ash that had named him. Even in sleep his ears flicked at every shift in the wind. "He's more than evidence," she said softly. "He's proof," Nolan replied, "that someone wanted this whole thing buried." Ash stirred, blinking slowly, then fixed his gaze on the photo. It wasn't a glance. It was recognition. Like a wire pulled taut between memory and presence. "He knows," Nolan whispered. Aurora reached for the journal again, her fingers steady now. "Then it's time we remember, too." The wind had settled outside, but inside the cabin, tension curled in the corners like smoke. Ash lay still near the fire, his breathing shallow but steady. Nolan sat by the table, nursing black coffee that had long turned bitter, while Aurora thumbed through the journal again, piecing lines together like a fragile puzzle. Owen stood near the back window, one hand braced against the frame, the other curled tightly into a fist. He hadn't spoken much since they'd found the photo Ash, Reyes, and Elijah, side by side like echoes frozen in time. But now something was shifting behind his eyes, not just shock. Guilt. He finally spoke, his voice flat and low. "My brother was a cop." Nolan looked up. Aurora stopped flipping pages. "He worked the same precinct, Southside Division. That's where Reyes was stationed. He never mentioned her by name. But I remember things. The way he'd come home late. The look on his face when the news said she'd died in a training accident. He didn't believe it. Not for a second." Owen turned from the window. The light caught the stubble along his jaw, the creases that had deepened since yesterday. 3 months before she died, he called me out of the blue. Said there were things happening at the precinct internal affairs wouldn't touch it. Officers going dark. Evidence lockers misfiled. Body cams erased. And a canine unit, this dog, he said it was smarter than half the team and twice as honest. Ash let out a small sound in his sleep, almost a whine. "I asked if he was in danger," Owen continued. "He laughed, said the danger wasn't coming for him. It was coming for her. Reyes." He took a breath, deeper this time, as if peeling back something he hadn't let air in years. 2 weeks later I got a call. My brother was dead. Official report said he crashed his car off route while responding to a domestic. Open and shut. Nolan leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You don't believe that?" "I did, at first. I wanted to. It's easier to believe an accident than betrayal." Aurora said nothing. She saw the way Owen's jaw tensed, the guilt pressing into him like frost into old wood. "But I started digging," he went on, "and everything led to one man." He turned and met Nolan's gaze. "Sheriff Doyle." The name landed like a stone. "My brother said he was rising fast, promoted beyond his experience. Rumors said he had leverage on people, on systems. And Reyes, she was close to blowing something wide open. Something Doyle couldn't afford to let out." Aurora's voice was quiet. "You think she was silenced?" "I think she got too close to whatever Doyle was hiding. And when Ash wouldn't comply with the narrative, they tried to erase him, too. Nolan sat back, rubbing a hand over his mouth. And Elijah? He wasn't even on that case. Owen's voice cracked just slightly. That's the thing. My brother said Elijah volunteered to help Reyes. Off the books. He was the only one she trusted. That's how he ended up in that photo. Aurora stared at the firelight flickering in Ash's fur. So the dog. He remembers all of it. Nolan whispered, That's why someone wanted him gone. The silence stretched between them, taut and fragile. I should have done something, Owen muttered. After my brother died, I shut down. Moved out here. I told myself the city broke him, that there was nothing left to save. Aurora stepped closer, her tone gentle but firm. You were grieving. That's not weakness. He looked at her then, really looked, and in his eyes was the wreckage of a man who'd watched the truth drown in silence. Now I have a second chance, he said, voice rough, and I'm not wasting it. Nolan stood. Then we finish what they started. He crossed to the table, opened the journal again, flipping to a page with faint markings. Elijah wrote something strange here. Find the dog. Find Reyes. The truth is buried where the signal dies. Aurora's brows furrowed. That sounds like a location. Owen nodded slowly. There's a dead zone about 5 miles east of here. Old radio tower's been down for years. Locals call it the Hollow. Cell signal dies there. So does everything else. Nolan looked at Ash. He came from there, didn't he? Owen met his gaze. Then that's where we go. The wood-paneled walls of the cabin creaked under the pressure of the wind, as if the old bones of the house sensed what was coming. The radio crackled in and out above the hearth, its static nearly drowning out the solemn voice behind it. This is Emergency Weather Alert Unit 6 White Ridge County. A second system is approaching. Visibility expected to drop to 0. If you are in a rural area, do not attempt travel. Stay indoors, secure shelter. Estimated impact, 6 hours. Owen clicked the dial off, letting the quiet flood in like snow through a broken window. His jaw clenched. He crossed to the woodpile, grabbed another log, and fed the fire until it snapped with renewed fury. Ash stirred near the warmth, letting out a faint huff as the air shifted. They say this one's worse than the last, Owen muttered. If the power lines go, we're on our own. Nolan had already taken inventory blankets, canned food, spare batteries. He worked in silence, steady but methodical, like a man who'd lived through his fair share of long winters and longer regrets. Aurora sat cross-legged on the floor near the far window. She wasn't looking out, though. Her focus was downward, face tilted slightly as her pencil moved in quiet strokes over the paper in her lap. The light of the fire touched the side of her cheek, warm against the faint bruises of exhaustion beneath her eyes. Owen glanced over as he passed. What are you working on? She didn't answer immediately. When she finally did, her voice was soft, reverent almost. A memory. She tilted the sketch pad toward him. It was unfinished, but the shapes were already clear. A tall woman, wrapped in a heavy winter coat, her eyes kind and strong. Standing beside her, drawn from memory alone, was Ash. His body lean, noble, the shadows under his eyes captured in cross-hatching that almost shimmered. Her mother's hand rested gently on Ash's head. They never met, Aurora said, almost in a whisper. But if they had, I think she would have trusted him, just like I do. Owen crouched beside her, studying the image. "He looks different," he murmured. She nodded. "He feels different, like he's still remembering who he is, but there's something solid in him now, like he chose to stay." Ash shifted, his ears flicking as if he heard his name through the quiet. "I used to think safety was a place," Aurora said, tapping the sketch gently. "But I think it's a feeling, and sometimes that feeling has 4 legs." A gust slammed into the cabin wall, rattling the windows in their frames. Owen rose to his feet, moving instinctively to check the bolts and braces. The cold was creeping in at the edges like an animal pacing at the door. "We're not going anywhere tonight," he said. "Best we bunker down and wait it out." Nolan re-entered with 2 extra kerosene lamps, setting them down with a grunt. "I'll board the side windows. Won't stop the cold, but it'll slow it down." Ash lifted his head, eyes following Nolan's every move. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just watched, quiet and alert, like he understood they were all holding their breath for something unseen. Aurora tucked the sketch pad into her bag, fingers brushing over the worn edge. She looked to Owen. "Do you think the hollow will still be there? Whatever Rhea's left behind?" Owen's gaze stayed fixed on the fire. "It has to be. Too many people buried the truth. She wouldn't have. Not if she died trying to protect it." Nolan's voice came from across the room. "Whatever's in that place, it cost my son his life. Cost Rhea's hers. Cost Ash his name." He turned, eyes shadowed but firm. "Whatever it is, it's worth finishing." Outside, snow had begun to fall again. Soft at first, then thicker, heavier. The horizon disappeared behind sheets of white, swallowing the trees one by one. Inside, the cabin glowed. Not just from the fire, but from the feeling that, maybe for the first time, none of them were alone in the storm. It began with a growl, low, uneasy. Ash stirred in the dark, body stiffening before sound even broke the silence. The cabin was quiet, save for the wind clawing softly against the shutters, until his snarl deepened into something primal. A warning from a place that remembered danger far better than words ever could. Aurora blinked awake. The glow of the dying fire still flickered across the beams. Ash was already up, hackles raised, eyes locked on the back door. "Ash!" she whispered. Then came the bark sharp, cutting through the room like a siren. Owen jolted upright from his place near the hearth. "What the hell?" Before the sentence could finish, the scent hit them. Smoke. Not the soft, woodsy kind curling from the fireplace, but thick, black, acrid, coating the back of the throat like oil. Aurora scrambled to the window and peeled the curtain aside. The barn behind the cabin was ablaze. It wasn't a small fire. Flames licked the night sky like angry fingers, orange against the snow-covered field, roaring louder than the wind. The structure groaned as timber popped and collapsed. Sparks flew upward like stars caught in reverse. "Jesus!" Owen was already pulling on his boots. "That's not an accident." Nolan stumbled into the room, rifle in one hand, coat half-buttoned. "It's the barn. Someone lit it from the far side." "You sure?" Owen asked. Nolan's voice was hard. "I smelled kerosene." Aurora stood frozen at the threshold, watching the fire dance with a kind of horror that didn't come from heat. It came from realization. "They're not trying to hurt us," she murmured. "Not yet." Owen turned to her. "What?" "They're sending a message." She looked down at Ash, whose body still trembled, tail stiff, nose high to the smoke-filled air. "They know he's here." Ash whined low in his throat, pawing at the door like he wanted to go outrun into the inferno and face whatever was behind it. As if some piece of him, old and broken, still thought it was his job to protect, even against the impossible. "No," Nolan snapped. "He doesn't leave the house." Owen moved fast, grabbing a coat and shouldering the emergency pack they'd kept by the door. If the barn's gone, it means they're getting close. If Doyle didn't know before, he sure as hell does now. "We need to move," Nolan said, already grabbing medical supplies. "There's a fire break at the creek. If it spreads to the trees, this whole ridge goes up." Ash growled again, this time toward the woods, not the barn. "There's someone still out there," Aurora said quietly. Owen didn't argue. "We'll take the lower path. Cover of snow. No headlights." They worked in silence, not panic, efficient. This wasn't the first time any of them had been forced to move with time clawing at their heels, but for Aurora, it was different. This wasn't a war zone. This was supposed to be a refuge, a quiet place where the worst had already passed. And now the flames had followed them in. She grabbed her sketch pad before leaving. It was instinct, not vanity. The last page was the drawing of her mother beside Ash. The edges were smudged, almost ghostly now. Ash brushed against her leg gently, his breath hot against the cold night creeping in through the open door. Outside, the fire roared louder, a language all its own. It didn't just destroy, it declared. "We see you. We remember. We're coming." They stepped into the cold, the snow swirling around their ankles like white mist. The barn groaned one final time before the roof collapsed inward with a violent crash. Sparks rose like angry embers. Ash paused beside Aurora, looked back once, and then walked forward into the dark. They didn't know what waited beyond the tree line, but they knew what they were leaving behind, not just a cabin, a warning wrapped in flame. They didn't wait for dawn. By the time the last embers of the barn collapsed into ash, Nolan had rigged an old wooden sled from the shed one with cracked runners and rope worn soft with age. Ash, still weak from the cold and trauma, was bundled in blankets and strapped down gently. His eyes were open, alert, but his body trembled with something deeper than chill. "Easy, boy," Owen murmured, brushing snow off his back. "We've got you." The wind had picked up again, like it always did before the blizzard turned cruel. Trees creaked around them as if warning them off, but they couldn't stop now. There was no cabin anymore, only a trail that dipped into the unknown. They set out under a sky the color of bruised slate. The snowfall was light at first, soft, drifting but deceptive. It thickened with every breath. By the time they reached the tree line, their tracks were already disappearing behind them. Nolan led with his flashlight low, one hand gripping the sled's rope, the other his rifle. Owen followed behind, eyes scanning the shadows. Aurora stayed in the middle half, guiding, half drifting, as if her feet remembered something older than maps. It was she who whispered, "Not that way," when Nolan veered toward the old logging road. He turned, squinting through the snow. "That trail leads down to the fire road. It's too open. They'll be waiting." "You sure?" She didn't answer, just pointed to a thinner path, a deer run, barely wide enough for one person at a time. Nolan hesitated. Then he nodded, adjusting his grip. "Then we follow you." And so they did. The snow swallowed sound, leaving only breath and footfall, the creak of rope, and Ash's faint whimper when the sled bumped over roots. They moved as one, silent, urgent. Aurora led them through switchbacks Nolan didn't remember, shortcuts between trees marked only by instinct. At one fork she paused, tilting her head. Then she did something unexpected. She hummed, a tune soft as snowfall, familiar, though the lyrics had long faded from memory. Her mother's lullaby, something she hadn't dared sing aloud in years. Even the storm seemed to hush around it. Owen looked up, startled. "Is that—" "She used to sing it when the power went out," Aurora said, voice flat. "When I was scared, she said it was older than storms." Ash gave a low sound, almost a sigh, and nuzzled deeper into the sled's warmth. Nolan watched the girl, watched the dog. Then he looked at the trees. Something about the way they moved like this wasn't escape. It was pilgrimage. They passed frozen creeks and trees bent under the weight of snow. Birds had long fled. No animal dared stir. The whole forest seemed to be holding its breath. Owen glanced back. No tracks behind us. Either they're not following, or they don't need to. "That fire wasn't meant to catch us," Nolan muttered. "It was meant to scatter us. But they underestimated the dog. And her." Aurora kept humming. Each note seemed to echo through the pines. It wasn't a song anymore, it was a map. The tower rose like a ghost above the treetops' wooden stilts, creaking with age, its silhouette barely visible through the thickening white. A relic from another time, half buried by snow and silence. Nolan spotted it first. "There," he said, voice raw with wind and urgency. "Ranger post. Used to be manned year-round before the cutbacks." It loomed above them, 20 feet of frozen stairs, iced over and uncertain. But it was shelter. It was higher ground. And right now, it was their only shot at surviving the night. "Help me with the sled," Owen said, already undoing the straps. They couldn't haul Ash up like this. Together, they lifted him, careful, slow, and climbed. Aurora went first, testing each step with the caution of someone who had learned not to trust what looks solid. Nolan followed, cradling Ash against his chest like a wounded child, the dog's breath shallow but steady. Owen brought up the rear, rifle slung and eyes watching the forest below. When the door creaked open, the smell hit them first. Dust, old oil, something metallic beneath. But it was dry. The floor was intact. A cot leaned against the wall, maps curled on the table. Long-forgotten coffee tins rusted on a shelf. No footprints, no signs of life in years. Safe for now. They set Ash down on a canvas mattress Nolan had cleared off. Blood had started to soak through the bandage on his side again, staining the fabric a muted brown. Nolan's hands didn't shake, but they moved slower than usual. "He reopened it during the sled ride," he muttered, unwrapping the layers with care. "Damn it. Tissue's thin. And whoever stitched him up before didn't mean for it to last." He dipped a cloth in the melted snow pot and wiped gently around the wound. Ash gave a soft, broken whine, but didn't resist. His eyes flicked toward Nolan, then closed again, trusting. Or resigned. Aurora knelt nearby, her fingers curling tightly in the wool blanket covering Ash's back. "Will he be okay?" Nolan didn't answer right away. "I've seen worse come back," he finally said. "But he's not just hurt. He's carrying something." "You mean memory?" she whispered. "I mean weight. Dogs like him don't forget. They don't move on like we do. They just hold it." Ash's body trembled faintly, not from cold, but from something deeper. Nolan pressed a hand gently to his flank. "Easy now," he said. "You're not alone anymore." Behind them, Owen powered on the old radio set mounted in the corner. The light flickered, then steadied with a weak hum. He adjusted the frequency with a practiced touch. "Station Echo 7, this is emergency channel. Do you copy? Repeat." Echo 7 requesting immediate evac or intel support. Coordinates: 45.962 north, 110.314 west. We have an injured K9. Possible law enforcement corruption. Respond. Silence. Then static. Then, say again. Repeat last. The voice was garbled, male. Could have been Montana Dispatch. Could have been anyone. Owen stiffened. Echo 7. Need confirmation of receiving party. Identify. Nothing. Just the slow hiss of snowfall carried over the speaker. He cut transmission. Nolan turned his head. That might have been help. Or it might have been Doyle, Owen replied. That fire didn't scare him off. It told him where to look. Aurora moved to the window, brushing the fog from the glass. Below, the forest was a quilt of white and charcoal, branches clawing at the sky. No movement, but that meant little in a storm like this. "He's coming," she said quietly. "I don't know when, but he won't stop now." Nolan sighed, rolling his shoulders. "Then we keep moving once the dog's stable." "No," Aurora said. They looked at her. She stood taller than before. Still small, still bundled in layers too big, but there was steel in her voice now. "No more running. Ash didn't survive all this to keep hiding. He remembers Reyes. And I think I remember something too." She turned, lifting the notebook she'd been sketching in. A rough image of Ash, curled next to a man's boot. The man wore a badge. "My mom drew this once," she whispered. "Years ago. Said it was from a story. A true one." Owen stepped closer. "That's Reyes. And that's Ash before they buried his past." Outside, the wind howled louder. Inside, the silence deepened, like the breath before a storm breaks. The storm had quieted, like the world was holding its breath. Aurora stepped outside the tower before sunrise. Ash followed, limping but alert. Something had pulled them awake. They moved behind the tower, where snow thinned under pine trees. That's where Aurora saw it. A disturbed patch of earth, snow uneven, pine needles scattered like someone tried to hide something. Ash growled. She dropped to her knees, brushing snow away. Her fingers struck cloth, then bone, then a metal badge. Reyes M. Officer, K9 Unit. Faded, bent, but still whole. Ash stepped forward and let out a sound grief, not bark. He lay beside the grave and moaned low. "You knew," Aurora whispered. When Nolan and Owen arrived, she held the badge to her chest. Nolan's eyes widened. "He was your handler," he murmured. Aurora nodded. "And someone didn't want that known?" Ash didn't move. His vigil had begun. 6 months ago, Owen said. Reyes disappeared. Doyle filed the report. Nolan's voice dropped. "Because he helped put him here." Aurora stood. "We start with Reyes." In Ash's old collar, hidden in the lining, Nolan found a USB drive. "A micro drive," he said. "Who hides a USB in a dog collar?" Owen asked. Inside the ranger tower, Nolan plugged it in. A password prompt. "Try his badge number," Aurora said. It worked. A folder. Evidence 241. 6 videos. All within 2 weeks of Reyes's disappearance. The first, Reyes in his patrol car, lit by dashboard glow. If you're seeing this, something went wrong. He showed files evidence of Doyle skimming narcotics, running ghost raids, laundering gear through a substation near Mill Creek. Then, warehouse footage, shadows, crates marked with federal seals. Reyes whispered, "That's him." Doyle, no badge, no uniform. Another clip played. Body cam. Reyes and Ash creeping through the dark. Gunfire. "Ash, go!" Screaming. A yelp. Then black. Nolan froze. Owen looked sick. "They left the dog to die." "No," Nolan said. "They tried to erase him." Ash stood now, eyes locked on the screen. A soft growl rumbled from his chest. "Why didn't anyone act?" Owen asked. "Because they never saw this," Nolan replied. "Whoever found Reyes buried him, hid the drive. You were the only one who got out," he told Ash. Ash sat, unmoving, but a vow burned in his stillness. "We take this to the feds," Nolan said. "They'll come first," Owen warned. "Then we make sure someone else gets out," Aurora said. "With this." Night pressed against the tower walls. The screen glowed with Rhea's footage, files, faces, proof of betrayal. No one spoke, not even Ash. "We have enough to burn half the department," Nolan said. "This goes public. Doyle goes down. But if we stay, we die," Owen said. Nolan didn't argue. "No rescues coming," Owen continued. "Doyle owns dispatch, the roads, the silence." "We can't broadcast from here," Nolan muttered. "Not from here," Owen said. "But I know someone. Elise Hartman, independent journalist, off-grid, lives past Ash Fork. You know her? She was my brother's last contact. Before he died." Aurora asked, "Your brother worked with Reyes?" Owen nodded. "So we hike 3 days through a blizzard with a kid, a wounded dog, and a flash drive full of death warrants?" Nolan asked. "One day," Owen said, "to Black Hollow Ridge. There's a ranger station, ham radio. I can reach Hartman." "If Doyle intercepts the signal?" "Then we're already dead." Ash stood still but alert. Nolan looked out the window. Nothing. "He's not lying," he whispered. "Then we don't wait," Owen said. "We go." Nolan grabbed supplies, flares, compass, rations. Owen spread out a map. We move northeast. "I know a pass under the snow line." "Even with a kid and injured shepherd?" "She's not your average kid." Aurora met his gaze. "He'll follow me." Ash didn't flinch, but leaned into her hand. "We leave before dawn," Nolan said. He sealed the USB into his coat's lining. Time wasn't theirs anymore. It was borrowed. Ash stood by the door, watching, waiting. It began with a sound low, mechanical, swallowed by wind. Snowmobiles. Nolan froze. "Move!" he barked. "They found us!" Owen muttered a curse as engines roared behind them. Aurora clung to Ash's sled, silent but steady. "They'll catch us," Owen warned. "There's a cave near the creek," Nolan said quickly. "Aurora, take Ash. Hide. Don't come out, no matter what." She nodded. No hesitation. While Nolan and Owen ran west to lead the pursuers, Aurora dragged Ash's sled through knee-deep snow, lungs burning. She found the cave half buried under a drift. Cold air breathed out like warning. Inside, she knelt beside Ash. His eyes met hers. He knew. Then, Footsteps, crunching snow, a flashlight beam. Aurora held Ash close. Shh. But Ash wasn't resting anymore. The shadow entered. Ash lunged with a savage snarl. A scream tore through the cave. The flashlight hit the ground, spinning. A gun skidded out of reach. "Stop!" Aurora yelled. Ash paused for her. The man tried to rise. Ash snarled again. He stayed down. "You were going to hurt us," Aurora said, voice trembling but firm. Engines roared past outside, missing the cave. Aurora curled in the dark, Ash wrapped around her like armor. And for the first time since her mother died, she felt safe in the presence of something with teeth. The Firewatch tower groaned in the wind. Inside, Nolan worked the console rewired batteries, cracked screen flickering. Owen watched the woods with a rifle. Aurora sat by the stove, drawing Ash larger than life, guarding her from faceless shadows. Nolan inserted the USB Reyes's last card. He bypassed encrypted channels and opened the emergency broadcast. Not to warn, to expose. Grainy footage rolled. Reyes, chest cam on, flashlight bobbing through a dark warehouse. Warehouse 9B. Officer Miguel Reyes reporting suspected off-the-record narcotics linked to Doyle's unit. In the corner, Ash, chained. "Milo," Reyes whispered. His old name, then chaos, gunfire, blood, and a voice. "Loose ends don't walk away, officer." "Doyle." Nolan pushed the feed to public. Ranger towers lit up. Rural newsrooms picked it up. Hashtags began to spread. Hashtag justice for Reyes, who's Ash, /North Pine cover-up. "What's happening?" Aurora asked. "We're telling the truth," Nolan said. Ash stirred. His tail thumped. He knew. Outside, the wind rose. But they weren't alone anymore. They had the signal. The world was listening. The shot rang out across the ridge. Then silence. Snow fell in spirals as Nolan slumped behind a boulder, bleeding. Owen's rifle still smoked. One of Doyle's men lay dead nearby. Too quiet. "Ash?" Aurora's voice cracked. She turned and saw him. Ash stood, chest heaving, blood darkening his flank, legs trembling. His eyes locked on hers. He staggered. "No, no, no." Aurora ran, catching him as he collapsed. "Ash!" she screamed, cradling him. His breath came in broken waves. His eye opened, closed. His tail thumped once, then stilled. "Ash, please." Her voice trembled. "Please don't leave me too." She rocked him in the snow, sobs breaking loose, raw, and endless. Nolan limped over, kneeling beside them, pressing his scarf to the wound. "We can't lose him," he whispered. Owen arrived, breathless. "We need to move. Now." "He can't walk," Nolan said. "She won't leave him." "Then we carry them both." Ash stirred, just enough to touch Aurora's leg with his paw. She felt it, her hand steadied. She leaned in, whispered the words her mother once sang. "You're here. I see you. I'll stay until you wake." Again and again. Ash's ear twitched. A breath. Still faint, but there. "He's still fighting," Owen whispered. And so would they, even if the mountain tried to bury them. The sirens had long faded, swallowed by the snow. Inside the emergency veterinary hospital, time crawled. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The scent of antiseptic barely masked the coppery tang of blood. Aurora sat curled in the corner of the waiting room, clutching Ash's collar, the metal tag still stained with blood pressed into her palm. She hadn't spoken since they arrived, not when the team closed the doors, not when they told her she couldn't follow. Across the room, Nolan sat flanked by federal agents. Owen leaned in, recounting what happened from the tower, the chase, the USB. Reyes's footage had ignited a political reckoning. Names, faces, Doyle among them. But justice was slow, and Ash was running out of time. A chime echoed. The emergency doors didn't open. Aurora whispered the inscription on the tag. Ash, K92147, if found, do not separate. Her voice cracked like dry leaves, then footsteps. Nolan knelt beside her. They're freezing Doyle's accounts. The mayor's being pulled in. Aurora didn't answer. He's strong, he's fighting. He didn't move on the helicopter, she whispered. He was conserving energy. A lie, but it was all Nolan had. Moments later, the vet tech stepped out, mask off, eyes unreadable. Ash made it through surgery. The bullet missed his lung. He's under observation. Aurora's breath hitched. Can I see him? Just for a moment. She followed the tech down the hall. Nolan stayed back, eyes on the news coverage. None of it mattered if Ash didn't make it. 3 days passed. Ash hadn't moved. Machines beeped steadily. His chest rose and fell beneath clean bandages. Nurses came and went. One hummed lullabies. Aurora never left. She slept in a chair wrapped in Nolan's ranger jacket. Her hand always rested on Ash's collar, now worn like a bracelet. She hadn't spoken, not to agents, not to anyone, because if Ash wasn't safe, none of their words meant anything. Owen tried. Nolan tried, but Aurora stayed silent until the 4th morning. As the sun spilled gold through the blinds, Ash stirred. Just a twitch. Then an eye cracked open, a dull glow, but alive. Then came the sound. A bark, soft, fragile, alive. Aurora leapt from her chair, palms against the glass. Ash's gaze found hers. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a scrap of pale yellow cloth, her mother's handkerchief, pressed it to the window, and spoke. Stay. The word cracked open the silence. Owen froze. Nolan turned. Stay, she said again, louder. Please. Ash blinked. His tail moved. Aurora collapsed to her knees, sobbing, not from fear, but release. She had spoken. First time in months. Nolan crouched beside her. You did it, he whispered. He came back, she said, voice trembling. You brought him back, Owen added. But it wasn't just the word. It was the word her mother used during storms, when the world felt like it might disappear. Stay, I'm here. Now Aurora had passed it on, and Ash had heard. The auditorium was small, no red carpet, just folding chairs, dusty flags, and a podium that dwarfed Aurora. But to her, it felt like a cathedral. Ash lay at her feet, still bandaged, still slow, but breathing, watching, present. Commander Wallace Gray spoke at the podium. This is not a farewell. It's recognition. Behind him, footage played. Ash in the field. Ash shielding Reyes. Ash wounded, crawling through mud but refusing to stop. This dog, Gray said, was marked unfit, disavowed. But we now know the truth. He turned toward Aurora. She's why he made it back, and now he's why she speaks. The crowd, agents, officers, locals, watched in silence. Ash rested his chin on Aurora's shoe. A woman in uniform approached the podium with a silver medal. Then a new collar, etched with one word, Guardian. "Ash is hereby reinstated," she said. "Not for combat, for a new mission." She knelt before Aurora. "Effective immediately, Officer Ash is reassigned to you as your guardian, your family, your voice." Aurora stared at the collar in her hand. Then slowly she reached out. Ash lifted his head. She removed the old collar-frayed, still bearing ashes. She fastened the new one gently. The room stood. Some clapped. Others bowed their heads. Because this wasn't just about a dog. It was about what he uncovered, what he endured, and what he became, not despite his scars, but because of them. Ash rose, trembling, and leaned into her side. She whispered something soft. Only he could hear. Gray returned to the mic. "There's an old saying, some dogs are born to serve, others are forged." He paused. "But only a few are remembered." The snow was gone. Where once there had been silence and sirens through pine, now there was birdsong. The earth had softened, and in the meadow behind the old ranger station, Ash ran. His gait was uneven, one leg stiff from the bullet, but he didn't care. The German shepherd chased after a clumsy frisbee throw, barking with pride. Aurora laughed bright, unafraid. She had freckles now, sun-kissed like winter had finally let go of her. Behind them, Sanctuary 1 stood half-finished but proud. What used to be the ranger post was now something else. A beginning. Fresh wood, clean windows, no fences. Nolan stood by the porch in jeans and a soft gray shirt. The stitched logo read, "Canine Therapy and Reintegration, Sanctuary 1. He didn't talk much now. He didn't need to. Beside him, Owen adjusted a crooked beam on the new kennel wing. "Don't say it," he muttered. "I didn't," Nolan replied with a grin in his voice. Owen had traded spreadsheets for sawdust. The field echoed with barking, not fear, just joy. "He's getting faster," Owen said, watching Ash. "Yeah," Nolan answered. "He's healing." They both were. Inside the cabin, 2 retired canines watched from shaded beds. One blind, one anxious. Here, they didn't have to explain. No dog was broken, no story erased. "Ash! Over here!" Aurora called. The shepherd bounded toward her, skidding to a stop and collapsing beside her with a grunt. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. Then, from her pocket, she pulled a pale green ribbon woven by her own fingers and tied it to his collar. A small gesture, but it felt sacred. The kind of knowing you're not taught. From the porch, Nolan looked away. It was their moment. Owen brushed off sawdust. "You think this place'll work?" Nolan watched the girl and the dog how they no longer flinched from light. "It already is," he said. The statue stood outside the North Pine courthouse, bronze and quiet in the thawed morning. Officer Teresa Reyes stood beside a lifelike Ash, gaze forward, alert as ever. A plaque read, "For those who stood alone in truth, until the truth could stand with them." There was no ceremony, just a quiet unveiling. Owen stood, hands in pockets. Nolan beside him, suit wrinkled, tie askew. He hated suits, but for Reyes, for Ash, he wore it. Birdsong mingled with traffic. Across the square, Aurora sat on the courthouse steps, hair braided, green ribbon now around her wrist, like a promise. In her backpack, a worn photo her, Ash, Nolan blinking, Owen photobombing proof that joy returned. The school bell rang. She stood. A teacher at the door asked, "Ready?" Aurora nodded, and for the first time clearly, not softly, she said, "Yes." Inside, hallways buzzed with lockers, chatter, spring laughter. She didn't flinch. She passed the classroom, where she once sat in silence. Past the office where her name was whispered. Past the poster. "Speak kindness. Even softly, it matters." She found her desk still marked with tiny scratches, but this time she didn't need her hands. When the teacher asked who wanted to read, Aurora raised hers. Her voice, gravelly but steady, cut through the morning like light through stained glass. And in a nearby house, Ash lifted his head. He didn't bark. He just listened, like always. The meadow had gone wild with spring. Soft grass swayed among wildflowers around the headstone, yellow, violet, pale blue, like the ones Aurora once braided into her mother's hair. She walked slowly, not from pain, from peace. Ash walked beside her, scars catching sunlight, eyes calm. He matched her steps. They stopped at the grave on the glen's edge. No gates, just trees like sentinels. Mara Quinn, loved deeply, gone too soon. You already know the words. Just breathe. Aurora knelt. The earth was soft. The wind smelled of blossoms and old rain. Ash lay beside her, head on her knee. She traced the engraved name. Then, like a page turning, she began to speak. All of it. The silence, the fear, the dog who wouldn't let her vanish. She told her mother about the snow, the tower, the collar hiding a USB drive, about Rhea's, about buried truth unearthed. She spoke of Nolan's quiet, Owen's jokes, a town waking from sleep. Her voice cracked only once when she spoke of Ash collapsing, too still, too quiet. But she didn't break, because she remembered what came next. His bark, her word, stay. She looked at Ash, her hand in his fur. He didn't move. She turned back to the stone. "I know you can't answer," she whispered, "but I needed you to know." The wind curled around her words. "He saved me too," she said, "just like you did." She pressed her hand to the earth one last time, then stood. Ash rose beside her, and together they walked back through the wild grass, not as ones escaping a past, but carrying it. Lighter, taller, unafraid. In the quiet bond between a child and a dog, we find truths that words alone cannot teach. Through snowstorms, silence, and shadows, Ash was never just a German shepherd. He was a guardian, a mirror to grief, and ultimately a bridge back to healing. His loyalty, like that of so many animals we overlook or take for granted, reminds us that love doesn't always come wrapped in language. Sometimes it arrives on four legs, with eyes that understand pain without needing to explain it. This story isn't just about survival. It's about connection. It's a tribute to every retired K9, every shelter dog waiting for a second chance, and every person learning to trust again. It shows us that even in a broken system, truth can rise. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to stand up despite it. Most of all, it's a reminder. Animals aren't here to serve us. They're here to walk with us, to love us exactly as we are, and to teach us how to do the same for others. If this story moved you, let it be more than a moment. Let it be a reason to adopt, to protect, to love deeper, just like Ash did.